So first up on today's episode, I wanted to go through a number of recently released patents. There's actually quite a few here that we can talk about. First up is actually going to be an integrally suppressed revolver. Daniel Waters recently posted on X about this and a number of other patents, and this is actually really interesting. So if we take a look at this guy, this is the first suppressed six shooter that I think I've seen as a proper like patented production. Correct me if I'm wrong, possibly there's something that's a little bit earlier than this, but this is an integrally suppressed revolver. Now, for those who may be watching who aren't in the know, revolvers are notoriously difficult to properly suppress for a number of reasons. But the main one is that cylinder gap that you have between the barrel's forcing cone and the cylinder itself. It's basically just a little small gap that sits there. And that's necessary for most revolver designs because the cylinder, of course, has to revolve. Now, this design does seem to be taking some notes from the Nagant M1895 revolver design. So essentially, it looks like if we go to claim 13 here, the revolver cylinder is actually being cammed forward as part of the firing process, and that's eliminating this gap. So this allows the revolver to be integrally suppressed. Now, the rest of the drawings do show somewhat of a kind of clunky design here. I mean, obviously, you're adding a suppressor onto the end of the revolver, so it's going to be kind of big and chunky inherently, but this is interesting. I would really like to see this actually come to market and see how well it shoots. Now, the patent itself does mention just 22 caliber here, but I would be really interested to see something like this in a 357 or 38 special maybe. But let me know what your guys' thoughts on this are. Let's move on to the next patent that I wanted to actually talk about, which was a open-framed revolver with a changeable drum. This is the Zenic and the Zenic RZMK357 revolver specifically. Now, this guy is almost like the Bond Arms Bullpup 9 and the Smith & Wesson Model 3 had a baby. So, a very unique design. So, instead of having the cylinder in its traditional location, if we take a look at the drawings here, you can see that the cylinder is actually moved kind of to the rear and above the firing hand. So, I'd be very curious to see how this shoots. And while I'm not sure if it's currently available for purchase, as I haven't really been able to find much information, Zenic LLC does have a active website with production images for the revolver here, or at least renders from what I'm seeing. They appear to be offering a black model and a silver model of the same design here, but it's kind of an interesting, almost bullpup take on the revolver design, and I'd be very curious to see, again, how does this thing shoot? Like, is it softer recoiling, or is the recoil impulse just kind of different? Very intrigued to see how this thing ends up shooting and what kind of niche this thing fills. Let me know what your guys' thoughts are on this particular one. Now, another design that I wanted to go over that is a recently published patent is from CZ. Now, this particular one is interesting because it's actually similar to something that I had talked about a little while ago, specifically that it's a design for allowing safe disassembly and basically disassembly without a trigger pull. Now, if you'll remember one of my videos previously talking and speculating about the Glock Gen 6 possible design features, also talked about the Glock getting a patent allowing them to have the pistol be disassembled without doing a trigger pull. So, this is something that is kind of interesting to me because now we have two companies here, both with patents on designs basically kind of doing the same thing with striker fired pistols. Both of them are trying to make it so that the pistol does not have to have its trigger pulled before disassembly, which is kind of an interesting trend, maybe? Now, I'm kind of speculating and getting in the weeds here, but maybe we're seeing a shift in, at the very least, the requirements for military or LEO procurements requiring these things, hence driving these patents to be designed and applied for from companies like CZ and Glock. But for the CZ patent specifically, last speculation that I've seen online points to this being something of a design intended for the Bundeswehr specifically. So, in this article here, we see that the cross sectional pistol P13 contract has been awarded to CZ to replace the P8 in the Bundeswehr. Um, Basically, the speculation is P13 will be in, of course, 9mm, and will be phasing out the P8. They're adopting a 7-year framework for this changeover, and that's supposed to have it started in November of 2024. But it's possible that this is something that's going to be going into the P13, and it's going to be something of a modified CZ P10F pistol or something similar. I haven't found a whole bunch of additional information on this particular, P13 and what its design features are. So if you guys have any additional information, I'd love to hear from you in the comments below. But getting a little bit back to my speculation, maybe on the civilian side of things, we'll start to see a little bit more of a demand for pistols that use these kinds of things, such as a disassembly without having to, pull the trigger. I'm not entirely convinced that that's something that we'll actually see, but, military preferences can inform civilian preferences and vice versa, so who knows what we'll see. But anyway, let's move on to the next patent that I wanted to talk about, Colt's Glock Killer. And again, Daniel Waters was kind enough to send me a link directly to this particular patent, and let's take a look at it here. Now, of course, on X, I was joking in my typical deadpan way that this was the M&P 3.0 on X, but in all seriousness, this is yet another entry into the striker-fired pistol market. Now, looking at through the patent drawings, descriptions, and everything, I don't see a whole lot here that's radically different from the existing striker-fired pistols that are on the market right now. But one of the things that I was looking at specifically was to seeing if this would be a polymer or metal frame, and I don't see anything in particular about it being polymer or metal. I would be really, really surprised if it wasn't polymer, but the thing is, Colt's been doing 1911 style pistols for quite a while now that I almost wonder if they might not have enough tooling, or at least tooling that they could retool to, produce this particular pistol with a metal frame instead. I would kind of be interested in seeing a striker-fired pistol design with a metal frame, because there are some benefits to having that additional mass and weight. Is it as comfortable to carry? No, definitely not. But given that Colt does have a history with 1911s, and that's pretty much their bread and butter. I don't think this is too crazy of a suggestion, but I don't know. It's probably far, far, far more likely that this does end up being a polymer striker fired pistol with, it looks like just a standard kind of Glock style pistol. Um, I'll show you some of the other drawings here on screen now, but I don't see anything that's too terribly radically different from, what's on the market right now. So again, I would be surprised if this did end up being a metal framed striker fired, but if anybody was going to do that from the factory, Colt might be the only one. But who knows? Let me know. Am I completely crazy and just totally off the rails here? Or is this something that you guys might actually be interested in?